Panel 10 is convened by the Graduate School of Letters, Osaka University. The panel title is called The Use of Metaphors in the COVID-19 Crisis, a comparison of East and West. I will now call on Professor Taro Mochizuki, if you are here, to introduce yourself, your panel, and the speakers at your panel. So Professor Taro, over to you.
Good afternoon. I'm Taro Mochizuki. I'm here in Osaka, Japan right now. And thank you for your attending this panel. So to begin with, let me introduce our speakers. Today we have 3 speakers in our panel. We have Professor Dr. Kasem Phenpinant from Chulalongkorn University, Bangkok, Thailand. And we have Professor Dr. Xiaojun from Xi'an, Jiaotong University, China. And we also have a medical and philosophical Dr. Peter Hatlow from Erasmus Institute for Philosophical Practice, Rotterdam, the Netherlands. Okay, so let me start with quoting an article from a newspaper. It was in a Japanese newspaper. So the article is written in Japanese, so I translate. It was the text written during the period of Tokyo Olympic Games in August last month this year. So let me quote from the article. Athletes live in the parallel worlds. Regarding the relationship between the rapid spread of the novel coronavirus and Tokyo Olympic Games, the spokesman of International Olympic Committee, IOC, answered, "The Olympic Village was wrapped with a bubble sheet." Here, please note, it's not an answer sheet for computer score tests, but a metaphor of a kind of plastic air bubble sheet. And he said, so it was a different world, separate from the real world in the city of Tokyo. So he seemed to want to say that the prior PCR tests were sufficient enough and that the infection had never spread to the city of Tokyo. But in reality, the so-called bubble sheet was full of holes. More than 380 positive results for the athletes and the tournament officials have been revealed as of 7th August. And in fact, 878 positive results has been revealed finally as of 9th September yesterday. So it was hard to say that it was a different world. However, I, says the author of this article, would rather feel the parallel worlds were somewhere outside of the venue of the Olympic Games and the city of Tokyo. The first one is a crisis world filled with senses of crisis on the outbreak of the COVID-19 infection, plus on the collapse of medical care. The other one is the optimistic world that was bubbling with gold medals obtained by Japanese athletes. In the crisis world, the medical experts warned many times of the rapid spread of infection. Holding the Olympic Games might indirectly lead to the spread of infection, even if it wasn't direct impact. Vaccination of Tokyo citizens was not in time. Above all, the worst effects of the highly infectious Delta variant were unpredictable. Actually, we are now following the worst case, the most pessimistic scenario, according to which the declaration of state of emergency doesn't change people's mindset and the spread of infection still continues. End of quotation. So the topic of our panel today is the use of metaphors in the current COVID-19 crisis. We have war metaphor, control metaphor, and others. And it seems people are using those metaphors in the parallel worlds. Suppose it is in that optimistic world that the war metaphor is used, then the SARS-CoV-2 is the enemy to be beaten and people will win. It is in the vision of that optimistic world, which is the other world, that the history of war with virus develops. People project their future vision onto the other world. However, that optimistic world is not this real world. This and that parallel worlds have different horizons. In that world, those people who believe in an optimism that finally humans will win a viral war against SARS-CoV-2, they share the horizon that serves their common optimistic understanding of the present situation, on the one hand. While, on the other hand, in this real crisis world, do we share the same horizon? COVID-19 is a phenomenon, and it presupposes a certain champ phenomenal in French or phenomenal fields in English, where men live with their body and grasp unconsciously any subjective reality with whatsoever understanding they may have. So you might say that the other world is a mirror of the unconscious phenomenal field, and that the analysis of the use of metaphors serve better understanding of this real crisis world. Taking over my introduction to this panel, the three speakers are now discussing how people use metaphors in different places in the East and West. So the first speaker is Professor Dr. Kasem Phenpinant from Chulalongkorn University, Bangkok, Thailand. The second speaker is Professor Dr. Xiaojun from Xi'an Jiaotong University, China. And the final speaker is Dr. Peter Hatlow from Erasmus Institute for Philosophical Practice, Rotterdam, the Netherlands. So, Ajahn Kasem, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Professor Taro, Mochizuki, for inviting me to join the panel. I think the topic that he proposed to me is very, very coincident. At the time, I just finished supervising my student who work on the metaphor in Derrida's. That very, very, very coincident. And then it allowed me to think further on the current issue on the COVID-19. So the whole paper, it's just a initial paper that everything's still going on. It just put a lot of facts of I gathering from the current issue, the current situation, and try to do the philosophically later. This is just a kind of brainstorm and bring out some information to discuss on. And basically, I find out that the whole metaphor that a lot of people use, including media and politicians, is about war metaphor. And I find it's very, very interesting to take a look on that aspect. As COVID-19 spreads or allow the growth, it is both a physical and it is a physical danger and psychological effect. And as we know, news media use the war metaphor to describe these pandemics we are encountered with. The coronavirus has been described as the enemies. The medical personnel is labeled as the frontline warriors. In Thailand, the same as the rest of the world, the government treats the pandemics as a threat, while portray the current at wartime. And the government speakers person would say, We are at war. We need to fight like we need to fight like a war. We will win. Everybody would win. Thai people would win. This expression metaphorically depicts current as a wartime imaginaries, but also point out the way in which the government calls for obedience and follows instruction. In other words, it give more power to the government to, to exercise its law enforcement on the one hand, and also the way they use the healthcare administration to control the people under the circumstances. Why war metaphor? I would say the COVID-19 pandemics have given war metaphors a new life. The coronavirus has been described as invisible enemies. In Thai, they always say this kind of invisible enemies has a big threat, and in this way, the government always keeps saying this kind of metaphor without go further in more detail. It's very interesting to see how the government use the term, war, use the term, invisible enemies. Use the frontline warrior when he identified the healthcare workers. In this way, very interesting the way in which the government use, not tied to directly deal with the pandemic issue, but tied to bring out the national securities. This is very interesting way that how the healthcare problems, pandemics case has to be the national securities, so that the government use that and also enforce this state of emergency law to secure its political power on the one hand, and also use it to administrate the healthcare issue. In this way, the government has embraced spouting rhetoric about the war on COVID-19. It's easily to create nationalistic sentiments. This is very interesting. It tries to bring out a lot of nationalistic sentiment that people have to support the government. On the one hand, they have to be strong. Don't let your guard down in order for the country to win. And that kind of declaration allow the government to treat the war as a justified war, and then in order to unite Thai people together. That could be the way it works. So that metaphors gives us honor in the fight for one's health. This allows the government transition the mindset of urgency and the employment of emergencies. With that, let me quote from the government speakers have keep saying like this: we are fighting pandemics. We are declaring war against COVID-19. The government protect everyone from coronavirus. We cannot let our guard down. Let me repeat, we cannot let our guard down. Healthcare workers are heroes, and they are the frontline knight who battle the invisible enemies. These are loud words. They are designed to excite and incite. In other words, every single day that the speakers keep report the pandemic case and also about the situation, they keep using this kind of metaphor. They keep repeating these sentences again and again, over again and again. It's like a kind of metaphysical language that allows people not only to keep the meaning of the war, but also use that meaning to excite people in the state of emergency, and it's a kind of urgent that people have to be united. This is the whole sentiment that happened for those who support the government on the one hand, and those who has been fearful of the COVID-19, even though they are stand against the current authoritative government. So what we can see so far about this kind of metaphor, we can see that the government attempt to exercise the use and abuse of power. Since the first lockdown in March and May 2020, the government has used the state of emergency law to take control of the situations. This is very interesting. Not only, I don't know how many countries that would use the state of emergency law to declare that kind of law to control and handle the situation, even in the serious condition like the locking down condition. But in Thailand, since then up to today, the government still use this law, not only to handle the COVID-19 issue, but it's a kind of political, political manipulation and political control. As a result, all political activities are not legally allowed. The police excessively exercise their powers to target activists and protesters. As you may know, in Thailand, there's a lot of protesters, a lot of political demonstration now in order to protest the current government, who that as a government that is at a part of coup d'etats 7 years ago, and it's a kind of they try to the succession power still there and take over and control the country, and the whole country haven't returned to democratic regime yet. Even though we have election, even though we have the current cabinet, but in politically we would say it's not democracy, and those political activists try to campaign and also protest, call for the new constitution, call for the new prime minister who represent the Thai people. In this issue, the government tried to use the law against the protester, and with that they also call for national securities by saying we still fight for COVID. We still fight against COVID-19. We fight for the whole country in order to return peacefully to the new normal. At that level, those kind of metaphor has been reused again and again by government speaker, as I said. So that if we look at the metaphor, I would say one person that I would have to take a look at is Susan Sontag, who once she wrote on her book used as metaphor. She also used that kind of metaphor. She explained that kind of in relation to her illness when she fight against cancer. And the war metaphor, military metaphor has been used in her work. And let me quote from her some passage from her. The military metaphor not only provide a persuasive justification for authoritative rule, but implicitly suggest the necessity of state-sponsored repressions and violence. Her remark is right. When the metaphor are applied to justify the authoritarian rules and law enforcement. For me, this is the shift from fighting the pandemics to blaming and stigmatizing those who do not obey the government and its authorities. It is very, very interesting in the case of Thailand, that kind of metaphor to be used, not only try to fight or accuse the invisible enemy as we know as coronavirus, but also use it to those who do not follow the government instruction. At the same time, they try to destabilize the national securities. As I said earlier, the way in which the government used the war metaphor in order to recall the national security issue, like we going to fight for the war, fight against the war. And this kind of war Thai people needs to be united together However, those who protest against the government, they try to, it's a kind of threat that has to be put in the control. They look like the enemy from within, even though the government doesn't use the term enemy to the protester, but it had a kind of sentiment. Metaphorically, it's a kind of sentiment that they don't look like coronavirus in this way. It's a kind of threat. It's a visible threat that the government have to handle it legally and enforce the law to put them in control in the same way that they try to handle the healthcare situation. With this come to the conclusion that the way in which the government used metaphor try to allow metaphor to constitute the new meanings. In this way, this kind of new meanings, the government linguistically develop a public recognition and collective awareness. The two collective awareness on the one hand is awareness of the coronavirus and COVID-19 pandemics that people have to be fearful and also have to follow and obey the government. Secondly, it come up with the political demonstration. It's a whole issue down to the political in those who pro-democratic regime and call for the constitution. In this way, the government used this kind of authority with the metaphor to justify its own act. At the same time, utilize it to endorse the legitimacy and, of course, the social and political violence against the protester, as well as use that to control the coronavirus issue. This, I would say, the government take advantage of metaphor to manipulate citizens and blame them for their misconduct. This creates a scenario that the COVID-19 could be won and victory could be declared by government. Ironically, I would say, to use the ironic and very, very critical of using this war metaphor, because when we think about war metaphor, war take life from people, while medical healthcare try to save life. We fight against COVID-19 that to save lives, but ironically, we use the war metaphor. It seems as if we take life from them. It's very, very contradiction and very, very irony. And also, I would say war metaphor is not just refer to the COVID-19 issue in Thailand, but also use it in order to go against those who pro-democratic movement and also against the government. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kasem. Yeah, now we realize that how war metaphor is used in the current situation in Thailand. And one simple question from the floor for Kasem. The question is, what kind of metaphor has been used against the Thai government over the mismanagement of the pandemic, like, particularly vaccine rollout, for example?
Basically this is very interesting. This is very interesting. Couple things. The way in which the protesters use the language against the government, like the stupid leaders when they call the prime minister. But the less of language they use, that ironically they hardly use metaphor publicly. They hardly use metaphor public. They directly go against and condemn them in the misconduct in the healthcare administration It's a misconduct of handle the situations. This is very, very interesting. Why the government still use a metaphor and the protester go the other way around, that very direct to the point that this is the issue. It's not a kind of war, because they know if they use the metaphor, they would fall into the trap that the government use, allow the national security sentiment, to take over the public recognition. And this is something, as I said, thank you for the question. Just reminding me, those kind of metaphor is hardly, really use the metaphor against the government. This is very, very interesting. And I understand that why, because they know every time they use the war metaphor directly have, national security in their mind regarding to those who working behind the government is come from military. It is not because the military, who control and work on the government administration, but the way the metaphor has been used, not just in Thailand, but throughout, it's allowed the growth, especially in the news media, that they use a metaphor a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. So protesters are rather direct. They don't use metaphors, but direct action. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, thank you very much, Ajahn Kasem. So our next speaker is Professor Xiaojun from Xi'an, Jiaotong University. So Professor Xiaojun, go ahead, please.
Okay, so can I start now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, okay. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Xiaojun Ding. I'm from Philosophy Department of Xi'an Jiaotong University, China. And I was very honored to be invited to give this presentation to you. And the topic is the use of war metaphor during the COVID-19 epidemic in China. So I will generally go through these topics very quickly and focus on the middle two of them. So first, I will introduce to you generally about the COVID-19 epidemic in China, and then I will introduce to you the war metaphor, how it is used in China when we are fighting against the COVID-19 epidemic, and then the advantages of using such a metaphor, and finally some remarks. So first, I think everyone has know a lot about the COVID-19 epidemic, which suddenly happened at the end of the 2019, and it as in China, especially in Wuhan city, it was firstly noticed the coronavirus. So actually, all of us, no matter who you are, what work you do, we are having COVID-19 epidemic are having quite important impacts on everyone's life or work or our study, especially when it comes to the students in my university. The students are they are taking the online courses, and as a teacher, I'm starting to learn how to do this kind of teaching online, and not only for the courses teaching, we are also having some like this, having some online seminars or some online meetings through the some media, also like Zoom or some other web online meeting rooms like Zoom in China. And also I will go directly to introduce to you the war metaphor, how it is used in China. So firstly, it was stated by Xi Jinping on February the 10th, 2020, that we are, and he firstly called this a war, and also he described this war as a people's war, and a total war, and some kind of blocking war, or some defense war. And he he especially stated that this kind of war, why he called it a people's war, because this kind of war is waged by the people, and it is for the benefits of the people. And to win this war, we are closely relying on the people. And we are also marshaling national resources to fight the invisible enemy. I can see that we are, whether it is Thailand or China or Netherlands, we all use the war metaphor, and we see the coronavirus as the invisible enemy. And also, so after that, there are many comics and some cartoons that described or depicted the coronavirus as some kind of, some ghosts or some demons. And the medical and the nursing staff are warriors. They are fighting against the COVID-19 epidemic or the virus. So we also say that the doctors are at the front line of the war. And I would like especially to explain why we in China use a war metaphor. I think there are some very important etymological explanation. So we Chinese use the Chinese characters are quite different from the English alphabet. So you can see that the Chinese characters for the disease and for the war and for the epidemic are quite similar. So for the disease, character for the disease, you can see the upper left, on my slide, the disease. It is pronounced as "ne" in Chinese, and it is a pictographic Chinese character. It is the appearance of some people who is sick and leaning on or against something to have a rest. It means disease. And for the Chinese character war, it has some, it means driving the chariots. So by combining the Chinese character of disease and war, we will get the Chinese character epidemic. You can see that it is a combination of the Chinese character disease and war. So the Chinese character for epidemic, it is pronounced the same as the Chinese character of war, and it actually means diseases like the operation of chariots are prevalent. So it becomes an epidemic. So it is very interesting. You can see that in China, the war metaphor is quite natural because it has the same pronunciation with the Chinese character war. It is kind of like some kind of pun. We talk about the epidemic, and sometimes we use the Chinese character for war to refer to the epidemic. And also in 2020, the Chinese character epidemic was declared as the international character of the year, and COVID-19 epidemic was declared as the international phrase of the year. And after that, we can see that there are many slogans and posters that use some words, some phrases that that we would normally use in a wartime, like fighting Wuhan, or victory for Wuhan. Actually, after on September the 8th, Xi Jinping also propose the spirit of the the spirit that he summarized, that we can somehow we can see during the fight against the epidemic in China. He declared that the spirit, he described the spirit as the following: life first, where where the life means the life of the patients of the infected, and unite the whole country to fight against the epidemic. Disregard one's own safety. It refers to the safety of the some CPC members, and also respect science, and also share a common destiny. And here the destiny, it's not only about the destiny of all the Chinese, but also about the people all around the world. We are living in the same world. So why we use the war metaphor? Also, although I've mentioned that it is actually quite a natural thing in China to use this war metaphor, because the pronunciation of the Chinese character war is exactly the same as the Chinese character of epidemic. And also, we can see that there are several advantages for using this kind of war metaphor. First of all, I think that by using this kind of war metaphor, so first we can visualize the objects of the prevention and control, because we are always saying that this kind of coronavirus is an unseen enemy. They are invisible, but by understanding the epidemic through the war metaphor, actually we can visualize the enemy vividly by picturing them as some demons or some ghosts, or some ugly creatures. So all the people in China, no matter their children or some old people, they can always see this kind of comics or cartoons, this and also these kind of slogans. They are helping people to understand what we are doing during this very difficult time, and what we are fighting against. So and next, so I think the also the advantage of the using the war metaphor is that we can understand, and we can more thoroughly know about the importance of weapons, because in the wartime, in order to win a war, you have to have very good weapons, so that you can have you can stand in a better position in the war. So it's also the same in the epidemic war. So actually in the epidemic, we are using our weapons, of course, are not this kind of guns or some gunpowders. We are talking about the high technologies we can use to detect the virus, or to defeat or to kill this kind of virus. So in China, many this kind of technological products designed and produced to fight against the coronavirus. So such like the nucleic acid detection self-service sampling machine, the infection robot. I think many people had seen this kind of similar robots during the Tokyo Olympic Games, and also this kind of thermal imaging intelligent helmet, and also the AI epidemic prevention control platform. This kind of technological products are the very good and very important weapons that we have to use during our war against the COVID-19 epidemic. And also I'd like to kind of to relate this war metaphor to the very famous Sun Tzu's Art of War, which is very famous in the philosophy in the Chinese philosophy of war. It is stated by Sun Tzu that for the generals, they must have the qualities of wisdom, integrity, benevolence, courage, and strictness. So, in the difficult COVID-19 wartime, we, like the government officials, they also have to have this kind of very good qualities like wisdom. So they have to respect respect science, and also they have to be to value people's life, have the benevolence, and they have to have the courage to fight against the virus. And also they have for the guideline, especially the some social distancing and quarantine regulations. They have to be restrictly, they have to be obeyed strictly. And also, I think there are more. In Sun Tzu's Art of War, I just take a piece here to demonstrate why it is very important to use a war metaphor during our fight against the COVID-19 epidemic in China. And also, finally, I would like to, I just got these pictures today from the internet. I'm not saying that this is all because of the war, because of the use of the war metaphor, but I think we can see how the current situation is in China, and to see now whether the war metaphor is useful or not. So partly, I think we can contribute this kind of situation progress to the war metaphor used in China. So there are some statistics from the internet we can obtain that points out the cumulative cases. Also with the global one and the Chinese one, so we can see that for the global one, the cumulative cases are still increasing, I think, quite rapidly. But for China, mainland China, the increase is quite slow, and actually for these days there are only like 10 or 20 confirmed cases daily. So and also for the cumulative deaths, we can see that for China, after May the 10th, there are almost no dead cases in China because of who are dead dead from the COVID-19 virus. And also for the cumulative vaccinations, we can see that almost half of the people who are vaccinated are from China. So most people in China have got vaccinated. So we can see that with the war metaphor, it kind of have gathered this kind of spirit and strength together to find although it is the enemies are invisible, but with the war metaphor, we can kind of to unite together to share our common destiny. And we can see that with this kind of hope in our mind, I think we can quickly or hopefully get back to the old good life again. And I think it is not only for the Chinese people, it is also for everyone in the world. That's all for my presentation. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Professor Xiaojun. Yeah, very interesting. It's very interesting to see how war metaphor worked very well in China. it was metaphor helped a lot to unite people. It's an advantage. People share the same destiny, and it made a visualization of the situation easier. And yeah, interesting. Thank you very much for your presentation. Now there is one question from the floor. The question is, how are positive metaphors used in relation to COVID-19 in China, such as double happiness, double lucky, double success, in relation to bringing down the number of infections in the country or early rollout of Chinese vaccines?
It could be double. What do you mean by double?
Well, the question says double happiness, double lucky, double success, stuff like that.
Double. I think, yeah, actually there is, I'm not sure, but there is actually a Chinese character which is always used during the wedding, which, you know, double happiness or double luck. I never seen that metaphor used in the in our fight against the COVID-19 epidemic. It is normally used in the wedding, to mean happiness to or the fortune or luckiness.
I see. Thank you very much. For me, it's very interesting to see that the pictographics of disease and war combined together make that of epidemic. I understand it very well because we use the same characters in Japanese as well. Okay, thank you so much. So the final speaker is Dr. Peter Hatlow from the Netherlands. So Peter, go ahead, please.
I'm trying to share my screen. Is that okay?
Yes, I see your screen very well.
Okay, Taro, so thank you very much for inviting me to this session and thinking about this topic. I will approach the topic from a European point of view, you might say, and leave the comparison to the floor, the discussion after my presentation with the other presenters. So metaphors for understanding a crisis, they are very old. I personally was inspired by the Decamerone, a 14th century Italian book, a classic of people locked up in their home voluntarily because of the plague raging in Europe at that time, 14th century. And probably all know what they did. They told stories. They told each other stories about their lives, about the situation, and in the end, about themselves. And that is what I am, as a philosophical practitioner, am interested in. So in my presentation, I want to approach the topic of our meeting from the perspective of a philosophical practitioner. A philosophical practice, for your information, is a kind of practical philosophy focusing at the art of living, the way we live, you might say. Its aim is not to teach about philosophers or philosophy, but to make people think like philosophers or to make people philosophize themselves. Individual consultations, like I'm doing, Socratic group dialogue, philosophical cafes, philosophy with children, are its main activities supporting this aim. Its structure of philosophical practice is reflexive. That is, it is a cyclical sequence, often starting with questioning, interpreting, understanding, and then questioning the understanding again, etc., etc. So with regard to the COVID-19 crisis, we should consider what actually is the best question to ask and what is the philosophical interpretation of this situation? And what kind of metaphor can capture its meaning best? These three aspects of what you might call the circle of wisdom cannot be separated, but I now will focus on the metaphor as a vehicle of meaning. In philosophical practice, a metaphor is a story, a coherent story expressing the main idea of a philosophical practice. It is often captured by a slogan or sometimes a new concept, for example, freedom practice, sexual practice, or health practice, referring to Foucault. You probably know his work. In need of a story, in science, you might even call it a theory, in order to understand such a concept. Or a metaphor enables the questioning, the understanding, the discussion, and in the end, the development of an idea in philosophy. It is judged by its aesthetic qualities, while it also has to match the fact, truth, and enabling good conduct, goodness. The way the metaphor serves the art of living, and it serves the art of living and is often considered the most valued outcome of a philosophical practice. So, since 2019, the emergent SARS-CoV-2 virus is a challenge for understanding. People trying to understand the situation and the crisis. In Europe, two dominant metaphors were put forward in March 2020, when the virus first spread. On the 16th of March 2020, the French President Emmanuel Macron addressed the French people with the famous words, starting with the famous words, "We are at war." He repeated the phrase 5 times during his speech. "We are at war." Admittedly, quoting him, a health war. "We are fighting neither an army nor another nation, but the enemy is there, invisible, like Kasem already pointed out, elusive, and it's making headway. And that requires a widespread mobilization." Very much similar to the other speakers. "We are at war. All the nation of the government and parliament must now be geared towards combating the epidemic. We are at war. The nation will support its children." These were the words of the French President Macron. We might call this the war metaphor, as its main idea is a fight against an enemy to be beaten. It is us against them. A common enemy we should all join the fight. A fight led by government and parliament. Now, the war metaphor poses several problems. There is no actually us and them in different uniforms, as the virus is a part of us, it's a part of nature, and we are a part of nature too. We might become ill and we might even die, but also we cannot wage a war against something like a virus. It is an unintentional part of nature. We cannot observe with the naked eye. So the war metaphor obviously is a form of a particular message, and we might philosophize what this message is. The answer to this question seems to lie in a speech of the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. On the 18th of March, so 2 days later, she also addressed the nation, but in a different, almost humble tone. She opened, "Allow me therefore to say that this is serious. Please also take this seriously." And the word serious is now repeated several times. Her speech was honored as Speech of the Year by a panel of Tübingen University. It was said to be a model of rhetoric. She called upon a sense of togetherness in order to approach the crisis. This, quoting her, is a historic task, and it can only be mastered if we face it, the corona crisis, together. We might call this the social metaphor. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel spoke about social cohesion and control. And now a very, for me, interesting philosophical point. She asked us to take a serious situation seriously. A message with a reflexive structure, like we are able to find in philosophical practice, which also seems actually to be the message of the war metaphor. Because what kind of situation could be more taken seriously than a war, with a threat to individual life and danger of social destruction? The reflexive structure mirrors the content of a message by its form, and vice versa. It affects a change of content too. The meaning of serious as grave can now also be read as earnest or important. The reflexive structure opens up, in philosophical practice at least it does, new horizons for understanding, which can be expressed in a practice. For example, sideway in a Socratic dialogue about anger, most valued moment is when the facilitator can ask the group if they are angry now, at the moment discussing the topic. When the group agrees, a new level of consciousness is reached. The group is no longer just talking about anger, but examining the conditions of their anger as such. And that's the same sense we're looking for in the COVID-19 metaphors. However, this does not seem to be the case in the COVID-19 crisis. The tone of the war metaphor and the social metaphor, it was quite different, but the corresponding practice was in fact the same. Lockdowns, social distancing, there it is, abolishing group meetings, testing, and eventually this year, vaccination programs with a promise to regain our old life again. So taking a serious situation seriously, what does it mean? If we approach the COVID-19 crisis from a philosophical point of view, we should, according to an old Stoic scheme, consider the facts limiting our thoughts, the logic they imply, and the ethics they call for. With regard to COVID-19, we can say that an infectious disease, the crisis can be attributed to two facts, and that is overpopulation and traveling. Because from old age on, referring to the plague, these two facts facilitate the flowering and spread of an infectious disease through societies. These facts imply also a logic, social distancing and reduction of real life traveling. And that's probably why we're meeting now online and not in the beautiful Bangkok. A logic not only to be followed in order to control the current SARS-CoV-2 virus and the epidemic, but also to prevent the emergence of new variants or new viruses, even new viruses. It implies an ethical duty to follow the logic in order to respect the health and well-being of yourself and your fellow human being. A return to our old life is a strong temptation, but also to be criticized from this point of view. The new ethics should actually focus on being in a virtual reality, with its quest of identity, authenticity, relationships, friendship, thoughts, expressions, and democracy. Obviously, the emergent virus implies a change of our life. Returning to old life is impossible, having lived through this crisis. Taking the serious situation seriously means change. It implies the end of mass meetings, a push of the individual into the virtual, and the end of mass traveling, maybe even globalization. The COVID crisis is a challenge to meaning. The Cartesian doubt of existence of the external world now becomes reality in our thinking on everyday life. We have virtual meetings with people we never saw in real life. And although I know the two of the other panelists, I hope the other members online even exist, or maybe they are created for my mind. I can doubt this situation. I don't know. They might be there to keep us in a state of purposeful aimlessness, as the action of small children sometimes show, building blocks just to break them down again and then building them again, etc. Life as we know it comes to an end. I think my message is the crisis implies change. And as knowledge of change is in the I Ching, the Chinese book of changes, I will propose actually to capture the current situation by one of its sayings. And I was lucky that Xiaojun corrected my Chinese characters on this slide. I hope there are 9, yes. The saying reads, when the way, our way of life maybe, comes to an end, then change. And having changed, you pass through. And we can explore the new horizons it will reveal, I think, in philosophical practice. So that would be my message, Taro. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for your very philosophical understanding of the situation. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, philosophical understanding of the use of metaphors in this situation will bring us to a change. Interesting message. Thank you very much, Peter. Now we have some questions from the audience. The first thing that I learned from the talks of our panelists is that even the same metaphor, I mean, war metaphor, has different meanings depending on places. Yeah, its meaning differs from place to place. It has a very positive meaning in some places, but it has a very negative meanings in other places. Interesting. So we have possibilities of different kinds of interpretation of the same metaphor. That's what I learned from the talks of panelists. Now we have some questions from the audience.
Taro.
Yes?
Is it possible to react to a remark at Kasem's presentation?
Yes.
There was a question about alternative metaphors, and I noticed that in Europe, indeed, the war metaphor meets basically suspicion with people opposing government or political actions. And that suspicion is usually captured by something you might know from Orwell's book 1984. So the book 1984, which describes a world constructed for people in order to control their minds, you might say. It's a fiction novel. Is a strong metaphor for the movement against the war metaphor, as I like to supplement the answer of Kasem to the question asked at this presentation.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Actually, I remember George Orwell's 1984 as well, and yeah, I remember that George Orwell uses something like double think in 1984, right? So metaphor is a kind of double think,
right?
I think. Yeah. It's interesting. Thank you very much for interesting suggestion, Peter. So we have some questions from the audience. There is this one. Yes, I have. Yeni Handayani from Indonesia has two questions to Kasem. Question number one: how the role of Thailand Army handling the COVID-19 pandemic in Thailand? The role of Army. Yeah, and the second question is Thailand Army able to become a tracer and vaccinator on vaccination national program in Thailand? These two questions.
Thank you for your questions. I think currently the Thai Army no longer plays a crucial role in this situation regarding to what has been developed further after the coup. Since the election, the body of the junta has been transferred into the political, part of political parties that support him. And I would say the current government, even though the prime minister, was formerly the junta, could not fully take control of the armies. And also the current the army chief hardly follow the government orders. Now they are quite independent from one another. So let's leave the army alone, I would say. But very interesting, they have some military personnel still work for the current government. They run behind the office, doing some, maybe some part of it like great job, and they mastermind a lot of things, manipulate a lot of situation. But when it's come to term the pandemic now, they're still very, very quiet, even though they try to direct the issue into national security issue. But this is not the case for the healthcare management, I would say. It's a public health administration that has to be responsible for the pandemic. But what I try to do in my talk is try to see how the government used the COVID-19 crisis, to handle it. The political opponents, basically those who pro-democratic people and activists, and use the COVID-19 and the laws, and the law enforcement to make them illegal. That could be the case. And then when they talk to the public, they hardly bring this issue, and the army hardly get involved. But the issue at hand is this. They tried. I think what Peter has said about the George Orwell book is very useful, from the fact that they use the metaphor in the double meaning. On the one hand, is you try to illustrate the idea that you have the enemy in order to divide us and them, even though in this pandemic situation, they have no longer us and them. It's just us. It's a humans has to be saved from this virus. But in Thailand, it's a matter us and them has been transformed in the second level of the metaphoric use that refer to the protester, to against them. And this kind of enforcement has been strong metaphorically.
So the use of metaphor in Thailand is very political.
Yes, very political. That I'm very, very into, because that's why, as I said, the metaphor is metaphysical language, the language that not only contains the meaning on its own, but also refer something else, that the free page of language, metaphoric language that allow people to act from government point of view, that allow the law enforcement to make the protesters illegal.
I see.
And capture the public sentiment as well as the public awareness of what's going on in the crisis.
Okay, thank you so much, Ajahn Kasem, for your answering to the question. So the soldiers are not the soldiers in army, but medical doctors, nurses, they are soldiers. And the commanders are not in army, but the commanders are in the government, right?
Right. That's true. I mean, very interesting the way they turn the way we understand, the military service from the army to the healthcare workers, and they call them the front line, warriors. They use, I think, not only in Thailand, I think in nearly every country, I would say,
Yeah, I think so.
I just surveyed the way they use language. They use the same language. In order to identify enemies, even though invincible enemy, that's the term. They keep using invincible, but they try to make it visible. The whole metaphor is this. They try to make the invisible enemy visible, that we can know who is the enemy, who we have to fight against, or who we have to fight for.
Okay, thank you. And another question for Peter. What are the metaphors, if any, used by anti-masks and anti-vaccines in the Netherlands and Europe?
Yes, that is why I was thinking about the 1984 novel of George Orwell. The language the anti-vaccine movement speaks is very much alike. So there's suspicion about even the existence of the virus. There's suspicion about the government measures, about the vaccination programs, and that suspicion is, if we look at it from let's say, a metaphorical point of view, usually framed in terms of Orwell, double think, double speech, that kind of thing. So I think that his novel can actually serve as a very good a way to understand the anti-vaccine movement and their suspicion.
But in 1984, protesters are arrested, right?
Yes, and they are not only arrested, but you might say they are also
they are executed.
Yeah. Even by Newspeak. I think Xiaojun's presentation is very much to see the connection between the Chinese character, the language, and the thinking, and that's something that is used in that fictitious novel 1984 to control the situation. Newspeak, new think, that kind of things. So I think. Yeah, I might say that in Europe, if we consider the alternative, the metaphor is George Orwell, 1984. So read the novel. It's nice to read if you don't know it or have not done it. But this might be the book that covers it. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. And there is another question for Xiaojun. The question is, in China, are there any alternative metaphors other than war metaphor?
Right now I cannot think of any other metaphor that is used during the COVID-19 period, but I think mostly we use the war metaphor, because I have just mentioned that the war and the epidemic, the two Chinese characters, they have the same pronunciation. So sometimes we just replace each other, when using this kind of Chinese characters or phrases. And for the other metaphors, for right now, I really cannot think of any other metaphor. But if I can, I think I will try to find more metaphors in the future. Okay, thank you.
So war metaphor is the only metaphor.
But could we think in some way in Chinese of the virus as being part of nature, and because we are part of nature, it is part of our nature too? Is there something in Chinese that can express that thought?
You mean the Taoism, something like that? Well, I don't know whether we can call it some kind of metaphor. Of course, from the philosophical point of view, we can interpret this COVID-19 epidemic situation through this kind of naturalistic philosophy that for this kind of coronavirus, they more and more recently we have recognized that maybe this kind of virus they should be regarded as part of our the part of the nature or the ecology. We have to try to find a way to live with them. But how to make how to propose some kind of metaphor to introduce this kind of idea to the Chinese public. I think that would be a very good idea. At the at the beginning or at the fight, a very severe part of our fight against the COVID-19 epidemic, we should use the war metaphor so that we can, all of us can gather together to fight against, although the invisible enemy. But it is now I think almost 2 years later, we have to, I think, to change our mindset. So maybe we can try to find some other metaphor. When we use the war metaphor, it is always some kind of fighting, some kind of we are against each other. But right now maybe we have to. I think Peter is right that we should have some different metaphor so that people can more they will be more likely to accept the idea of living together with this kind of virus.
Yes, in my personal practice, you might say the war for people personally, the war metaphor, it has its political function, as has been talked about. But personally, when people try to understand this crisis, it does not work. Maybe people more think of it about a kind of natural disaster, like a tsunami or something, something that happens to us as a kind of crisis, a disaster. That might be something for people personally to understand this, and there we might find better metaphors for understanding than the war metaphor, might say.
Yeah. Yes, I think you're quite right that at the post-disaster period, we should change the war metaphor to something else. We cannot always, to stay so nervous and to take that kind of very, we are opposite sides, so we cannot live together. But it seems that now the situation is not like that. So we should change our mindset and to get a better picture of the world, of the world situation.
Yeah, there is a kind of related question from the floor. Does war metaphor in China happen to have any negative implication among the Chinese public?
Negative?
Yeah, any negative implication of war metaphor among Chinese public?
I think so. I think like any country or any areas in the world, the war metaphor, of course, they are used I think they are very useful when we are fighting against the COVID-19 epidemic. But there are many people, because all of this happened so suddenly. When we are not well prepared for it. So when we are asked not to go out, and we have to stay at home, and and also we have to get vaccinated, and even right now, there are some quarantine guidelines regulations in China. So actually, right now it is at the beginning of our fourth semester. And the students and the teachers, we have to to do this kind nucleic acid test before I think it's 2 weeks before you get back to the campus. And all of these, the guidelines, are for the safety of the students and the teachers. But they will bring you some. They are bothering you. Some people, they complain a lot about it. But I think it is understandable that we are, we want to get back to the old days. We like to go anywhere. We like to do anything we like to. But things have changed a lot. During this COVID-19 era, all of us have to change, like what Peter had just presented. Yes. So the answer is that yes, there is a negative side. I already mentioned some of the aspects that I have observed, in the, in my own campus life and my own study. And I think there may be some other complaints also. There may be some similar situations like what had happened in the other countries in the world. But generally, I think all the Walmart for all the regulation guidelines, they have made very effective. They are very effective, and they have contributed a lot to our fight and our recovery from the COVID-19 epidemic. Yes, thank you.
Can I ask you a question, Xiaojun? Because I found it very remarkable in your presentation that the invisible enemy, in the cartoons, it was pictured now as monsters or something fighting it. Can you reflect somewhat on that necessity to picture the invisible enemy in order to make the metaphor live, you might say?
So I think in order to visualize, in order to make the invisible enemy visible, we have different kind of measures to do so. But what I have observed is that we use a lot of comics and cartoons, and also a lot of posters to picture the coronavirus as this kind of very very ugly and horrible demons, and some ghosts, some other creatures like that. So people would be afraid of them. We are even for the children, when they see this kind of comics, they know that the virus are very bad. So we should stay away from them, and we should to fight them back. But as you have just mentioned, in the post-COVID-19 era, we have to change our picturing of this kind of invisible enemies in a more friendly way, I think. Otherwise, we will still be afraid of this kind of viruses, and we will not easily accept to live along with them.
Thank you. Yeah, I would rather on the side of Saint-Exupéry. The essential is invisible. By the way, in Japan, war metaphor no longer works. The Prime Minister Suga declared that he will resign, and people think that he lost the war against COVID-19. So, he is a loser, people say. Anyway, there is another question from the floor addressed to both Ajahn Kasem and Peter. I read the question. If French and Thai leaders had seemingly identical discourses, how similar or different are the implications in terms of emergency measures and freedoms? The difference, similarities between Emmanuel Macron and Prayut Chan-o-cha.
At first hand, they seem to be very similar, I'm afraid. Because I recognized very much in Kasem's presentation that was, you might say, very familiar for me with regard to the French policy.
But Macron didn't use the word metaphor politically. But in Thailand, Prayut Chan-o-cha uses the metaphor very politically to repress the protesters, right?
That's right. That's right. Taro, I think Macron used the term in order to gathering people to support the healthcare workers to fight against the COVID-19 pandemics. But in Thailand, it's a matter of, I would say, it's a matter of control that the government uses to control people. And in this way, it's less freedom in Thailand when whereas in France, it's allow people to exercise their own freedom. What happened, the difference between last year and this year's situation in France, after they got vaccinated, and then people get more freedom to express, even though they have the infect case high, but they still, open up, the policy of freedom that people can live, whatever they want to do. But in Thailand, they use it to in terms of very, very repressive regime, not only to take freedom of political freedom, but also freedom of living without helping people to live their lives smoothly in this crisis. That very, very different. In the state of emergency, I think the Macron government respond, rapidly to the situation. In Thailand, they just use the term emergency, but the way they work slowly, it very, very slow react to the situation, since not only the vaccine issue, but also how they treat those who get affected by the virus. That.
But mind that in Europe now, France is the first country that introduces a corona passport, in order for people, as you say, to move around freely. So I think in Europe, the war metaphor actually works strongest in France, and you might say, political oppression, but it looks very much like people are forced to be vaccinated in order to regain their freedom. So.
Right. It's very, very opposite. Very interesting to say. It's go to different and opposite direction, where even the two countries use the same metaphor.
Right.
It has a lot of things to do with social implication and political manipulation when the term has been introduced to the public.
Taro Sensei, may I just say, metaphorically, time's up?
Thank you so much. So Robin, do you have any remark?
I just have just very quickly. I found your discussion very, very interesting. I know we've said that about a lot of panels, which are all true, but this one, I do believe that in our era, we do need a lot more philosophical reflection. As one French philosopher said, we don't need God, we need philosophy. So
we agree.
So very, very informative. You touched on the divide, the use of the war metaphor as a divide and conquer tactic. You touched upon it as a way of fostering national unity and social cohesion, and hence the need for great, strong, benevolent leadership. I found the discussion also of the idea of new weapons, to fight the invisible enemy, very, very interesting. And that links up with what the historian Yuval Noah Harari is saying, that will be the lasting impact of this COVID-19 pandemic. Will ultimately, one of the things will be the new ways of surveillance under the skin. And that's a very interesting idea. And of course, lastly, Professor Harteloh, your idea of, if I can use the everyday language, which is, it's the new normal. the change that we have to live with, and so on. So that's a fantastic panel. And Taro, thank you very much for guiding this panel.